In Montreal, we live and breathe creativity. This is where big players and small studios craft their greatest success stories and come to harness our superpowers, our top talent, our innovative ideas, and our appetite for adventure. We're building a multiplayer ecosystem for the bold and the brave, here to propel projects to new heights and push the entire creative industry forward by giant steps. We're designing an open and inspiring world known for its diversity and joie de vivre. We're behind thousands of celebrated works from all four corners of the galaxy. We are Montreal. Get in the game.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to today's presentation. My name is Stella Fleury, and I will be your host for today. And I just wanted to, before we get into our presentation for the day and I introduce to you our different presenters, I just wanted to go over a few different orders of business before we get started. So first, just so you know, this presentation will be recorded. So many of you might have questions or might want to re-listen to what some of our presenters have said today. So please feel free to just re-listen to the recording. It will be made available on the same webpage where you found your where you signed up for this event, so you can listen to the recording. And secondly, I know that many of you will be having lots of questions regarding immigration, what the immigration process is to come to Canada, to come work in Montreal. I do want to tell you before we get started, for those of you who are interested in those questions, this subject will not be addressed during today's presentation. We've actually put together a series of immigration presentations in 4 different languages that we will be sharing with you later on, where you can sign up and you'll know what the dates are and everything. So just feel free to register for those and know that any immigration questions that you'll be asking today, we will unfortunately not be able to answer. So without further ado, I would like to invite my other presenters on the line, especially Cecilia Lai. Cecilia works with Desjardins, and she will be our next presenter. We also have a few other people here who are on the call that you will hear from Natalia later from Co-op Talus, who will be explaining to you a bit the process for finding a place to live and all the different steps. She'll also be joined very shortly by Heidi Pinsonneau, who is a real estate agent who's also going to give you a few hints and tips about finding a place to live. And we've got Josh here, who's going to be our silent partner, our silent presenter. He's going to be answering all of your questions in the question section on your right. And I think, Josh, is there a presentation that we have to share here? I think that's going to be coming up shortly. So what we can do is we can start our presentation with Cecilia, who's going to be introducing the financial aspect, all of the financial keys that you're going to need to relocate to Montreal. So Cecilia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stella. It is always a pleasure to be here doing this presentation for Montreal International and for all those who are interested coming to Montreal. The presentation is regarding getting settled in Quebec, starts with Desjardins. We are Desjardins Group, a financial institution, which is a cooperative. It is important to know the place you're moving to, and also to know what are the financial system is fit for your coming to this country. So I'm Cecilia. I'm an advisor, business strategy and cultural community development at Desjardins Group for newcomers and cultural communities. And then let me talk about a little bit of what we do, Desjardins Group. We are Canada's leading cooperative financial group in Quebec, Canada. We actually offer over $445 million given back to members and communities. Why and how to members is we offer dividends on an annual basis to all the members to Desjardins Group. So if you are a member, like you have an account with us, you become a member because you have the right to vote for the CA committee. And as for the communities, all organizations, not-for-profit organizations such as youth, students, or any refugee organization or newcomers organization, well, Desjardins Group offers financial support to these organizations also. And over the years, we have over 7.5 million members and clients from all around the world in the Desjardins Group. We call them the Desjardins family. So if you become a member, you are part of the Desjardins Group family. We have over 800 service centers that provide services to you. We have over 52,000 employees, and over the pandemic period, we actually hired more because there's a high demand for international services. So that's one of the reasons why the number had increased in terms of the demand. We are the first Canadian financial institution to sign with the UN principles for responsible banking, such as no paper, and we also deal with a lot of digital services as opposed to paper statements or some sort. And we are the largest private employer in Quebec and one of Canada's greenest employer, according to MediaCorp, which is investments for companies and enterprise, such as small startup companies who have their mission to have a better environment, to greener, habits, while Desjardins Group encourage these entrepreneurs. Our goal is really to support you as newcomers to Canada and make it easier for you to settle into the country. As you can see from the picture here, the picture says it all. We are multi-ethnicity and we speak over 12 languages, whether it's Spanish, Mandarin, Cantonese, or Arabic. And we have a lot of colleagues coming from France. I know there's some of the participants today are from Romania and Ukraine. So you are also very welcome to take advantage of our services. So it's a very dedicated team for personalized support to all newcomers. And how do we support you? That's the question. Step by step, before you come to Canada, we offer the service of opening the account remotely. So therefore, you don't need to displace yourself to a branch or anything. You can request the account opening online, and it is easy and free. And then we also have the office, which is representative in Europe. It's called Desjardins Europe Representative Office. That's dedicated for the European customers. And then when you arrive to Canada, well, we have a team that is there from 8 a.m. Eastern Time to 10 p.m. Eastern Time at the airport to welcome you at your arrival. And all the services and products are ready available for you. And like today, we offer webinars and workshops for all the newcomers, as well as people who are already here, to actually educate them for how to integrate financially into the Canadian system. A tailor-made offer is really important for our newcomers. Desjardins Group thought of all that because myself, as a second generation from an immigrant family, we realized that when you arrive here, you have financial needs, you need a bank account, and you don't want to worry about all these transaction fees. So we offer this program as a bank account with unlimited free transactions, plus a debit card, which you may be calling at your country a bank card, and it is free, no charge. And we also know that here in the Canadian system, the credit is very important. So we offer the credit card with no annual fee for any newcomers who have no credit history. We recognize also the years of driving experience that you have already in your country. Therefore, when you apply for a car loan and you want a car insurance, well, your years of driving experience are recognized also, and you could possibly get a discount. There's a small safety box that is also available for you in this program for newcomers for a period of 12 months. In case you have your passport, you want to put it in a safe area instead of in your apartment, that's a possibility too. And of course, who doesn't need the international transfer service coming from their country? So it's very, very important to take note that this program, it is available for all newcomers, whether you are a student or a worker coming here for a contract, this program is available for you. What are some of the main costs to keep in mind? We talk a lot about like finding lodging, finding an apartment, how much it's going to cost for food or TV. We all have a smartphone today to be able to communicate with our helpers. So a plane ticket, I say roughly around $1,500 on average, depends, of course, where you're flying from. And winter clothes here in Canada, well, we have 4 seasons. We have winter, spring, summer, and fall. So you have to take also into consideration how much it's going to cost you in terms of clothing and keeping yourself warm as well. The telephone, roughly, it's $45 to $100 per month, depending on the plan that you are using. And of course, also depend on the supplier that you would want to go with. Internet, yes, we all need internet nowadays. I don't know how we can live without the internet today, but it is a must for us. Therefore, it's about $45 to $120 per month, roughly here in Montreal. And also we have providers that actually can provide you the bundle services, which is the internet, including the TV and the telephone. So it's about $95 to $250 per month, and it's very wise to actually get the bundle if you can afford it when you are here in Montreal, because you always get a discount. So shop around. I mean, we can always help you to find the supplier, but you can start shopping actually in your country before you arrive here. Of course, there's the health insurance. Newcomers don't really consider that as a priority, but sometimes like the first 3 months they arrive and they don't know, they get sick, then they have to pay the expensive fees to go see a clinic, a private clinic, and might be costly. So think about the health insurance, roughly $650 to $1,000 per year. It could add up quite quickly. So have that in mind, have your budget in place before you arrive here. Of course, health costs. If you're covered by the RAMQ is actually the Medicare card that we have in Montreal, and that allows you to actually go have access to health services covered by this card, and you don't need to pay a fee. If you don't have and you're not covered by RAMQ, well, you'll need to buy private health insurance, like I mentioned before, ahead of time, so you're covered as soon as you arrive. So you don't want to be stuck in the last minute to get all your things settled. So that is very important, and it's a priority, whether you're coming by yourself or your family. Housing, just to have a comparison of how much it costs for housing, we actually pull out different main cities. So New York City is roughly $4,350. Vancouver, a little bit lower, $1,935. Toronto, slightly lower. And Montreal, it's much lower than all the above three cities. Of course, because the cost of the housing is very low. But if you decide to come to Montreal and eventually move to Quebec City, well, it's roughly $900. Of course, all these numbers can change with time, but based on the sources that we found, these are roughly the average costs per month. And then there's home insurance. So nowadays the tenant have to buy home insurance, so it's roughly $350 to $2,000 per year. Useful website, we put it here, kgg.ca. It's actually available everywhere in the world. So if you're looking for rental or any place, you can access to this website, and you can find a place to rent. So how does banking system work? Opening an account before you leave for Canada, which is strongly recommended. I mean, it's easy, it's free, it's hassle-free, and lets you transfer your funds before you leave your country, and your debit card is ready as soon as you arrive at the airport. So you have access to your funds too, because we have an ATM machine at the airport. So it's very easy and simple. If you wish to open the account, like here, there's a website, visit desjardins.com/open account. And also at the end of the presentation, the team will also send you the link to how to access to an advisor to open your account. And then when you arrive, important to have your passport, your work permit, or your study permit if you're here for a student, international student, proof of Canadian legal status, Canadian address, where you're staying, whether it's temporary or permanent, it's important to have an address, your social insurance number, and your tax identification number at the service center. So all these information is very important to have it when you open your account. These are confidential information, and we need it to be able to open your account. And then there's the payment methods in Canada. Well, we use cash here. It's quite not as often as it used to be. Most of the consumers use debit cards, credit cards, because credit cards give you certain points depending on what type of credit cards. Debit card, well, it's easy access to your existing funds in your bank account. Interact e-transfer is very popular amongst consumers. Checks, contactless payment, whether it's you insert your credit card into your Apple phone or your Google phone. And so it's Google Pay, Apple Pay, it's a service that's available. And we also, with the Desjardins mobile app, well, there's the mobile check deposit, so you don't need to go to an ATM machine to deposit your check. You can only take a picture and it will be deposited directly into your account. Raise a hand here, important to know, if a check of yours is cash but there isn't enough money in your account, you will be charged a fee. It's important to inform the newcomers because different banks in your country might work differently. But here, there are always a fee that is charged to your account if there's not enough funds in your account, and you want to avoid that as much as possible. Cards for your banking. So we mentioned the debit card. It's immediate debit, immediate access to the funds in your account, cash withdrawal, payments in store with merchants. So you go to a grocery store, any clothing store, you have access to your cash with the debit card. Free when you open an account, but there are charges for transaction. Well, this, we put it in brackets because depending on if you want a service package, but for newcomers, it's 12 months, no charges. So you don't need to worry about that for 12 months. But then after 12 months, you receive a letter from us, and then to inform you it is time to change your the status of your account to a regular account. Cannot be used for online purchases. It's not a credit card, it's a debit card. So a credit card deferred payment. So it's basically you borrow the money from the credit, and then after 21 days, you will receive a bank statement, whether you choose electronically or by mail, and then you would have to pay that balance. So that's why it's called deferred payments. The money doesn't belong to you, you are borrowing it. But however, if you don't pay off that amount at the 21 day, then there will be interest that will be charged on your credit card, and that would add up to the balance that you already have used. There's always a credit limit. As a newcomer program, approximately is $500, but if you're here for a working contract, there's a possibility of increasing this credit limit to $1,000 if needed. So that would be done with an advisor, and it's very simple. Also, the credit card at the beginning, the simple credit card that is offered with the program, there's no rewards, but if you choose to eventually get a credit card, there are credit cards with rewards such as points, cashback, and then insurance also. If you use it to purchase your cell phone, for example, well, you lose it, there's coverage for insurance too. All depends on what type of credit card you'll be applying for. And the credit card, it's for online purchases. So you can use it for Amazon purchases and all kinds of online purchases or grocery purchases. It's available for online purchases, unlike the debit card. Payments in store with merchants, stores, groceries, clothing stores, same thing. And of course, if not paid promptly, interest is possible. It will be add up, and it helps to build your credit history. Like I explained in my previous presentation, is that the credit card helps newcomers to build their credit history eventually if they decide to stay here and they want to apply for a mortgage or house loan or car loan. Well, it's like your birth certificate, I say, in the Canadian system. If you don't have a good credit history, there's no way you can actually apply for any credit or loan to buy your house or a car, or even student loans if you need, or a line of credit, unless you pay everything by cash. So credit score, quickly, it's so you can see pre-authorized payments, phone, internet, all these suppliers. Well, TransUnion and Equifax are the two partners that actually have all the information regarding your credit history. So therefore, if you have a history of non-payment of your phone bills or electricity bills, or you missed a mortgage payment or two, then TransUnion and Equifax, when we pull up your credit history in the report, it will show that you have not necessarily the best discipline, I would say, the best discipline to pay your bills. And you have to be very careful. And it is where we look as a financial institution to make sure that we can lend you the money to make sure that you're a responsible payer. So credit score is very, very important. Good or bad payer, well, when you consult it, we can tell from the scores, such as excellent, it's 780 or more. Very good ranges from 720 to 779. And you go down to very poor to 579 or less. Well, that's usually where we don't open the account to the applicant. So the credit history includes every good and bad payment. So it summarizes very much all your history of your credit payments. So it's very, very important to keep that intact and as excellent as possible. And account fees. Canadian bank account fees are charged based on the number of transactions you make each month. Of course, there's always different packages. There's fees charged for each transaction, but there's also fixed fees charged per plan. And your checking account must not have a negative balance. When your negative balance means it's overdraft, that means you have trouble maintaining your account to a positive, and that doesn't look well for when a financial institution or look at your your profile, your banking profile, and it's very important to keep it as intact and as positive as possible. And tips for saving on banking fees is that, well, you can choose a monthly plan for transaction. You can also use your financial institution's ATM, and don't use other financial institution ATM, such as if you have a Desjardins account, well, don't go into, I don't know, for example, RBC account ATM machine, because they're going to charge you an extra fee. We recommend to use online services instead of going in person to the counter, because there's also a transaction fee when they take money when you pay your purchases at the counter. And we consider using a credit card and paying it promptly to avoid being charged interest. So because every time you use your credit card, there's no transaction fee, as opposed to a debit card, there's a transaction fee. But of course, if you like to know more about the detail of the different plan to avoid these transaction fee, well, we can help you with that. But again, as a newcomer, you're coming, there's 12 months unlimited transaction and free of charge. So you don't need to worry about that for the first 12 months. Online banking, checking your account and credit card balance, it's very easy, user-friendly. Transferring money between accounts or abroad internationally is also very easy. I mean, today everything is pretty much digital, so we, as Desjardins Group, we strongly encourage our members to use online banking. You can pay your bills easily. You don't need to go to the counter to pay your bills anymore, holding a paper. And you can also open a saving account online through our website, desjardins.com. So it's very user-friendly. It's free, it's easy, it's safe. No matter where you are, you can do it as long as you have internet and the application on your phone. And so the credit cards, I have to do it quickly. Credit cards, managing your monthly statements. Tips for managing your credit card. Well, it's set up an automatic payment to pay 100%. There's an option that you can actually pay 100% whenever it's actually used. So it's very, very user friendly. And it's recommended to pay the entire balance on your statement, if not 50% of your monthly statement. Thank you. That's all for me. If you have any question, I will let Stella manage the question period. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Cecilia. You actually got quite a few questions, which just for us to be conscious of time, we are going to address them at the end of the presentation. Very pertinent questions, and you did get a few pop-ups as well. You'll notice invitations, links towards the Desjardins pages. So don't hesitate to click on those and check them out. But without further ado, I'm going to let now Heidi and Natalia come on to the presentation and discuss with us today important points about relocating to Quebec. So ladies, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Estela. So yes, for those who don't know, Cooptalis, we are an international company that facilitates the mobility of workforce, and we support companies in their recruitment efforts all over the world. So today, Heidi will be giving the presentation with me. We have been working together for many years. So let's start now with a question, Heidi. Can you give us an outline of how the real estate system in Quebec works?
Sure, that's a great question, actually. And I would start off by saying that Canada is a very vast country with a very different landscape of real estate values from coast to coast. So it's important when you're looking up information about how to relocate and how much is it going to cost you to either buy a home or to rent an apartment, that you specifically look at the Quebec market. So one of the great examples to illustrate this is actually to look at the values at one end of the country. So if we're looking at a standard home, 4 bedrooms with a garage in Vancouver, that would run for about $1.7 million. In Toronto, sensibly the same price. And that same home here in Montreal will cost about $560,000 or so. So it gives a good indication of the differences in price according to the province. Although we've been hearing a lot about the fact that home prices and rents are soaring in Montreal, it remains still one of the most affordable provinces in the country. So maybe before we start talking about all of that, one of the key points is to understand how the system is built and how all the actors are there and can help you out with that. So maybe we look at something called Centris, which some of you may know it as MLS, which is a system that all of the brokers share together. And so all of the properties that are for rent or for sale through an agency are all combined in this one website that's called centris.ca. So definitely a resource to remember and to utilize before you arrive, because it will help you get a sense of the values. Now, in all of this, maybe we could explain the role of the brokers as well. So how it works in our province is that an owner would hire a listing broker to represent him in a transaction, whether it's to sell a property or to rent it out. And then he becomes the listing broker. He looks after the interests of the owner. And then a buyer or a possible tenant will hire a collaborating broker who will represent him in the transaction. And that's really important to understand that each party has their own representative and that they look out for the interests of their clients. Of course, one of the questions that we get often from newcomers who are not familiar with the system is to understand the structure fee and especially the commission fee. So maybe we go through that. A listing broker will negotiate with their client, so the owner, a commission, and then that listing broker will share the commission with the collaborating broker. And the system is done this way so that both parties are always represented by their own brokers and that there's a collaboration between everybody. And this is the reason why one broker is able to show all of the properties, even though they're not listed in their own agencies. So it's a great service. It really helps you when you're coming from abroad, because then you've got your partner that's looking out for you, that can show you the ropes, how it works, that can show you the neighborhoods, really give you a hand. So it's no cost for the tenant or the buyer, and it really gets them set up properly. So definitely something to do.
Thank you very much, Heidi, for showing us the difference between the two types of brokers. That said, I have an additional question for you. Do we necessarily have to hire a broker in order to buy a property?
That's a great question, actually. So there is no obligation to have a collaborating broker, but a listing broker that has a client that comes to him directly wanting to see a property, either to buy it or to rent it, has the moral obligation, it's actually one of our legal obligations actually, to recommend that that buyer or that tenant goes and seeks out his own counsel to be represented. So it's definitely something that's very important here in Quebec. You can find a broker that is used to working with people who are coming from abroad, and so they definitely know how to show you the ropes and how it works. They'll probably give you neighborhood tours. They'll do visits, virtual visits with you before you arrive, so that you can really get a sense of where you would like to live in the province.
Good. Thank you very much. Now, could you guide us through the stages of a real estate purchase?
Sure, absolutely. So we're just going to go over quickly the process because we really don't have a lot of time. But at the end of the presentation, the three things that we should remember is that it is a simple process, it is a very quick process, and it's a very regulated process. So although we're not necessarily accustomed to the system, we can have trust in it because it's very efficient. So as Cecilia said from Desjardins right before us, your banking partner will be a crucial element in your project to acquire a property. And oftentimes, newcomers, when they come to the province, they don't realize that they too can actually get a loan to buy a property, even though they've just arrived, even though they don't have that credit history that really we should think about a credit history as a report card on our financial habits. It's really important to take care of. So the bank is really important, and we can have access to a loan when we've just arrived. The difference is how much cash down are we going to have to put? So if we've just arrived, we don't have a status, the bank is probably going to require 35% cash down. If we've been living in Quebec for a year, we have a great job, we have a great history that we've built, we can probably access programs that will allow you to put a much smaller cash down, 15%, 10%. So it becomes a goal that's achievable. So anyways, so we work with the bank. You do visits with your brokers that can show you every single house that's for sale in the province through an agency. We present an offer, and then it's transferred over to the notary. And that whole process can take as little as 30 days. So we see a home that we like, 30 days later, it's possible to be the owner of that house. And just to give you a sense of costs, it's about 2% of the acquisition price. Those will be the fees associated to a purchase. So they're not very big, actually. And that explains also why Quebecers have a very particular real estate relationship. They often sell and buy and sell and buy. The average time that somebody stays in their own house is about 5 years, 5 to 6 years, depending on where we are. So there's a big turnaround. It's a very dynamic market for sure.
Yes, exactly. Can you give us an example of acquisition of home? Heidi,
sure,
please.
Absolutely. So we frequently do these webinars for our clients, and we had a couple that had arrived in Canada, well, in Quebec about 6 months ago, and they gave us a call and they wanted to buy a family home. So it was a couple with their child. Probably doesn't mean much to you right now, but Saint-Basile-le-Grand is a city that's about 30 minutes away from downtown Montreal. There's a train that goes there. It's a beautiful community, 465 square meter of land, so a big yard for the child to use, 4 bedrooms, fully finished basement because we love our basements here, and a garage. So this couple went ahead and made an offer last year. I think it was in November. If we look at the next slide. So in November 2020 last year, we made an offer and we were able to secure the home for $470,000. And we negotiated that they would go to the notary to actually purchase the home and take occupation 6 months later in April. And you see that very same house today would cost $570,000. So they're overjoyed because they've made this great investment on top of having this wonderful place where to live now. So it's if this is something that you're considering, it's a great idea from the time that you arrive to start looking at those options. If you're not ready yet, that's fine, but still try to make a plan so that you're able to move as quickly as possible to get into the ownership. Right. So this one is a great one. So one of the first things we need to do when we arrive in a new country, of course, is learning the words and how do we describe apartments. It's very particular to Quebec. The way we do this is that we will describe an apartment in terms of 3.5, 4.5, 5.5. And what does that mean? So your base will always be the living room that counts as 1, your kitchen that counts as another 1, and the bathroom is always a half. This is regardless if there's 2 bathrooms in the apartment, it will always be considered as a half. So your base is 2.5, and then afterwards we add a bedroom. So if you've got a 3.5, you've got a 1-bedroom apartment. If you're looking at a 4.5, you've got a 2-bedroom apartment, and so on. You get the idea.
Yeah.
We also have something called a duplex. So a duplex here is actually, it's a building in which you have 2 separate apartments. So usually you've got 2 families living in there. And of course you'll understand triplex, 3 separate units. You might often hear about bungalows, which are 1-floor houses that have a basement as well. And this is just a little trivia information. We love our shoe boxes, which are small houses with a flat roof that are stuck between 2 bigger buildings. So you'll see that a lot when you're in the East End or in the Sud-West of the city. it's something that's become very the pride and joy of Montreal, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so here you have many resources, and you have a depending of the type of property you wish to obtain. But we advise you to be very vigilant and watch out for false announcements. What do you think about that, Heidi?
That's a great point. So you have the choice. You can either work with a broker to find a rental, or perhaps you decide to go out there on your own and kind of go through all the ads that are placed, which also is a great source of information. Namely, there's Marketbook for Facebook, Kijiji that Cecilia talked about. Just a word of caution, though. We've seen an uprise in fake ads. So people will copy a real ad, they will announce it at a lower price, and they will ask the person from abroad to send the money to secure the apartment. So we would really have a word of caution that it's important to work with somebody on premises. So either you work with a real estate broker that's licensed, either you work with a relocation firm like Cooptalis, or maybe you've got some friends and families that are already in Montreal and they can go and actually visit the apartment and they can make sure that we're truly dealing with the owner. So that's the little word of caution, to just be careful about that. We've seen an uprise in our expats that are coming to Montreal that are renting without seeing the premises. And that's, of course, it's normal because there is very little inventory. So that's also something that we need to consider. There is definitely more demand than there is offer, which means that when you do find something you like, it's important to be ready to be able to secure it really fast. But again, I would recommend working with somebody who can go and validate that you're really dealing with the owner themselves.
Yes, it's very important. And for different reasons, some people prefer to wait before buying a house. What about the rental process in Quebec?
Sure. So it's just as simple. The challenge is not really going through the process of renting it as much as finding a unit that you like. So Cecilia talked about the credit history and how important that is in this province. And she is so right and couldn't stretch that more, because banks and also owners will rely on the credit check to determine whether or not they want to rent the apartment to you. Now, of course, when you're just arriving in the province, you haven't had time to build that credit check. Therefore, we need to compensate for that lack of history. And how do we do that? Well, we prepare a file. So before you're coming to Montreal, I would really encourage you to put together some papers, which are your pieces of ID, your visa, your work visa, a presentation of you, your family, what you're doing, where you're coming from. If you have a work letter of employment, that's amazing. And also sometimes they will ask you to show that you've got the funds in your bank account to cover at least 6 months of rents. And there's something else, as Natalia, as you know, it is not legal in the province of Quebec to ask for a security deposit. Mm-hmm. However, it is very customary. And especially so if we're coming first time into the province and we don't have that credit history, we have to expect to have to pay right away the first month's rent plus a security deposit. So once you've got that file all ready, that's great. You can visit some apartments with your broker, and then they'll sit down and they'll make an official lease that is a standard form issued by the government. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty straightforward, actually. Yeah.
Good, thank you.
So just a little touch on this quickly. We do have an entity, a government body entity, that regulates rentals in Montreal, in Quebec, excuse me. And there's the obligations of the tenant, obligations of the landlord, and it's a pretty fairly even relationship. So a tenant that would not be paying their rent, within 3 months, the owner could have them taken out of the apartment. And the same way that a landlord that doesn't maintain the property correctly, the tenant could receive compensation. So it's a pretty equal relationship. There's something in Quebec that's called the automatic renewal of your lease. And so if you don't say anything, if the landlord doesn't say anything, your lease will renew itself automatically from year to year. They also have the possibility of increasing the rent, and they will have to give you sufficient notice before the expiration of your lease to let you know. And of course, there's always recourses possible should you disagree with the increase in rent, or should there be any kind of problems. Just be rest assured that there are recourses for you.
Good. Thank you, Heidi. And I have a question. What can I do if I am looking for an apartment and I have a pet with me?
Yes. So that's a great question. So for those of you who do not have pets, it is not a great time to go and adopt one. So as we were saying, the offer is much lower than the demand. And so landlords really have the choice of the tenants that they want to take. So usually they will say that no smoking, no pets. Those are usually the standard conditions. So as you'll see on the map, it illustrates it great actually. At the bottom, you'll see all the apartments that do not accept pets. And on top, you'll see the only 3 apartments that do accept pets. So it's not to say that it's impossible to find an apartment that will accept your dog or your cat, but you might need somebody advocating for you to try to negotiate that. It might be helpful for sure.
Yes. With all the information you gave us, I think it's important to have a budget for the rent. Are there any other costs we should consider?
So absolutely. So your rent will include all the taxes. There's no extra taxes to pay annually or monthly. It really is fully inclusive. You will have to pay separately for various utilities, such as hydro, which is the electricity. Depending on the size of your apartment or your house, it should run you about $90 to $130 a month. This is just an estimate. I've had clients in a 1-bedroom apartment that their cost is $45 a month. So it really depends. The bad news is that internet and cell phone were probably the most expensive place in North America, as you'll soon find out. But that's compensated by the fact that our electricity is one of the cheapest in America. So it evens out, hopefully. Home insurance. So it's not something that's mandatory, but definitely recommended. If anything, it gives you a civil liability. So should there be an accident by, unfortunately, there's a fire and then there's damage to the property, then you'll have insurance to help you out. So when you're budgeting, this is fairly a good amount to be looking at.
Yeah. Well, that's all for us. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions about housing, don't hesitate to contact Heidi. Or if you have questions about relocation, you have my email address just there. Thank you very much.
Natalia and Heidi, thank you guys so much for your presentation. It's always full of super practical information. And I've been kind of following the questions also on the side while you guys were speaking. A lot of very pertinent questions. We do hope that we'll have enough time today to answer a few of them. We're taking note. So we're definitely going to ask you guys to come back at the end of the presentation to answer a few of those. So thank you very much, ladies. For the next few minutes or so, I'm going to be presenting to you guys today a few tips and tricks on how to really ace your application when you're applying for jobs, especially during our video games and visual effects event that is currently taking place. So now's the time for you to apply. I've got lots of tips to really help you make your resume stand out. So just before starting, I mentioned at the beginning of today's presentation that we are going to be having some presentations on immigration. Many of you guys probably have a lot of questions on, you know, how long the process is, what it's going to take for you to immigrate to Canada. So I highly recommend that you register for one of these events. I know that there was a question at the very beginning to see if there's any presentations in Spanish. This presentation, unfortunately, is not available in Spanish, but we do have the immigration presentation available in Spanish, in French, in English, and in Portuguese. So make sure to register for one of those, and we'll definitely sign you up. One quick word, really. Oh, perfect. That's Josh just shared the information about the checklist for Co-op Talus, so make sure to sign up onto that. One quick word about immigration as well. None of these presentations will really be addressing any of your personal questions. A lot of your cases are unique. A lot of your situations are unique with you and your family. So just know it's very general immigration information. However, if you do want someone who really assists you and gives you advice on your unique immigration situation, please just make sure that you speak to someone who is accredited and who can legally give you advice. There are a lot of frauds out there. We want to ensure that you get the right advice, that you get legal advice. So either a lawyer that is accredited from the Quebec Bar Association, or a certified immigration consultant. So please watch out for frauds. And yeah, so we do invite you to register for one of these events. You'll learn a lot of information about immigration. So, what am I going to be talking to you about today? I've broken it down into three separate subjects. So, firstly, how to prepare your candidate profile, how to prepare your resume and get that ready so that the recruiters can really see what they're looking for in a candidate. Then, if you are invited to an interview, how do you prepare for the interview? And finally, I'm going to go over a few steps and important dates for our actual recruitment event that is taking place now. That is the Journée Québec video games and VFX recruitment event. So a few details about that for the very end. Now, how to prepare your resume. So this is the first slide is really the structural part of your resume. How are you supposed to present it for a Canadian and Montreal recruiter? Well, firstly and foremost, here are the things that you must have in your resume is obviously your name in the order of first name and last name. A lot of other countries do it in the other order, so just make sure you put it in that right order. Your contact details, obviously. But what does that mean? Your contact details nowadays is your LinkedIn link, your email address, and your telephone number. A lot of people ask, should I put my postal address, my mailing address? Honestly, it's really up to you, but it's not required. So don't feel the need to have to do that. Now, the next 2 points is really in the order that you should be presenting your resume. Is you begin with the professional experience part of your resume, and you end with the education or training. Now, I'll say this again, but I'll say this later, but I'm saying it now as well. In Canada and in Montreal, employers really prioritize professional experience over education or training. It's different in other countries. Diplomas are very valuable, obviously, even in Canada, but it's the professional experience that really takes precedence, and that's more important. Next, elements that are maybe important to have. So, not obligatory elements, but very good, valuable things to add to your resume. Firstly, it's a good idea to always put a header, maybe 4 to 5 lines, a little paragraph, really just presenting who you are, what your experience is, what you can bring to an employer, really just describing yourself. A lot of people put in their resumes as well a very brief, quick references to what their technical skills are. So this can be software, this can be, skills like actual competencies that you have, really just in a bullet point or something similar. And finally, the languages. Usually people put that at the very end below the education or training section. Also, if you have any certifications or if you have any, prizes or things maybe that you won throughout your professional career, you can always put that at the very end. Languages indicate your spoken and written level of each language, and obviously we're in Montreal, so if you do speak French, definitely indicate that, and or English as well. Those are the two languages to emphasize. Now, what do you leave out from your resume? You leave out your photo. You don't put your photo. You don't put your age, and you don't put your marital status. Anything that can be considered personal in that regard is not required and actually is not requested by recruiters. We want to ensure that it stays as professional as possible. Same thing as well for your national insurance number, or anything that has to do with personal, confidential, private information. Please leave that out from your resume. Now, if we go to the next slide, really just tips. How do you really make your resume pop? How do you make sure that it really stands out to the recruiter? Firstly, make sure that you really only provide relevant work experience, relevant training, relevant skills, anything that's really relevant to the job that you're applying to. Um, if you realize that you're applying to a job and you really don't have any relevant skills or relevant work experience, you might want to question on whether you're actually qualified to apply to that job. You need to have the experience that they're looking for, especially when recruiters are looking to hire international talent. You've got to prove to them that you do have that experience. So make sure you only put relevant information. Oftentimes people ask me, okay, I do have pertinent and relevant work experience, but there was a time where there's a gap in my work experience. Either I was staying at home taking care of my kids, or maybe I was working in a completely other sector or as a complete other job. What do I do? In those cases, you still have to account for that gap in your work experience. So definitely indicate what you did during that time. Just don't waste much space on it. Make sure that the space that you use is really for relevant and pertinent work experience and not for anything that would not be considered that. This goes to my second point, really, that you have to avoid packing too much information. Make sure that you really put on a need to know basis. So your sentences need to be short, straight to the point, and, don't go too much into detail. The length of your resume, we say 2 pages, ideally 3 pages maximum. So try and respect that as much as you can. Now, a lot of the times when you want to detail, so what about that work experience that is relevant, that you really want to elaborate on? A really good example is to actually use action verbs on what you actually did during that job. So, did you help build a game? Did you develop a video game? Did you, train colleagues in certain experience or things like that? So when I say use action verb, really try and keep it action oriented. Like, what did you actually do? Obviously, use proofread and spell check everything, your cover letter, your resume. Make sure that there's no grammatical errors. Ask your colleagues or friends to read over your resume as well if you really, want to be sure that it's well written. And a lot of the times people say, how do I know what's relevant? How do I know what I need to put on my resume? Your best inspiration should come from the job description that you're applying to itself. So, oftentimes, what I tell candidates is print out the job description, print out your resume, and then connect the dots and see, okay, do I have work experience that relates to each point that is required from the job? And that can really help you, develop your resume and go further into those details. And so, like I said, work experience is a lot more important than training. So you want to put your emphasis on that rather than on your education. Oftentimes, if you just got a diploma, just indicate what you studied in, what years you graduated, and that's good enough. No need to go into detail. Cover letters. I get asked this a lot. Should I write a cover letter? Should I not? Um, there's no clear answer. You know, some employers really do put a lot of value on cover letters, and others don't even read it. So, my recommendation is better to have it than to not have a cover letter. So, definitely add one if you can. If not, I mean, you know, it might not be a big deal or it might be. So, just keep that in mind. And finally, especially for this event that is in video games and in visual effects, make sure if you have a portfolio, especially if you're more of an artistic profile, make sure you add the link to your portfolio on your resume as well as on your candidate application. Always a good piece of advice. Okay, so I'm just being conscious of time. I've got about 20 minutes, so I should still be good to go through my content. Now, the actual website that we're promoting here is talentmontreal.com. That's the website where you're going to find a ton of jobs, especially in visual effects and video games for the moment, because that's the event that we're promoting. But you'll find also other jobs in other sectors, mostly IT. So, a few tips about how to make sure that your talentmontreal.com profile is its very best. Firstly, once you start filling out the profile, before you even add your resume or anything, um, the system is going to ask you to add skills to your candidate profile. Now, skills are mostly what we would consider to be technical skills. So, like I said, any software that you master, any, you know, training that you did or certain certifications that you have that, you know, can really be considered technical skills. Now, when you're uploading your skills, when you're writing them down, you can really, as much as possible, only use one word as much as you can. Do not use sentences. Don't say things like, I am very familiar with JavaScript. No, that's not going to help you. Just put JavaScript. And this is really because the talentmontreal.com portal works as an algorithm to match your profile to what the recruiter is looking for. So, a good tip as well is to actually look at the job description and see what the skills are on the job description itself. It'll help you to adapt your profile if maybe you forgot to add any skills that you're good at or anything like that. Obviously, and this goes without saying for your resume, for your cover letter, and for your talentmontreal.com profile, you have to be honest. So if you don't have those skills and you see that it's really very much of a requirement for the job, maybe question whether you're qualified to apply. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the job description itself. And yeah, so a few other points. We spoke about skills. Make sure that your resume is uploaded in PDF format in either French or English. So because you know the recruiters usually speak both languages, make sure you upload it in either one of those languages. Some of the jobs that you will be applying to on talentmontreal.com will have what's called pre-selection questions. Now, those are questions that for the recruiter are requirements for the job, and they want to kind of they want you to specify a bit more about your profile. So it might have to do with any certain experience that you have, or if maybe you've worked on a certain type of project that's really important to them. Well, they're going to ask you that question, but not all of the recruiters will put that question on there. So if you do have to answer that question, just make sure that you answer it correctly because those questions are the only things that you can't change from your application once you've applied to the job. You can add more skills after you've applied. You can change up your resume. You can change a whole bunch of things on your profile, everything except the pre-selection questions. So make sure those you've answered honestly and correctly. And we're going to show you a little video further on about really how to provide your availabilities for the interview as well. So make sure that you do that when you apply. So up to the next part now is preparing for your interview. So I've broken this down in 3 sections: before, during, and after the interview. So how do you prepare before your interview? First step is really do your homework. You know which company has invited you to interview. That's great, by the way. Congratulations if you get invited. So you want to be ready. So first and foremost is really just Google them. See what sort of projects do they work on, and not even just for the interview, but for your own personal interest to know, is this a company that you would like to work for? Do they have interesting projects? Is it really, is what they're doing really cool? Well, you can look at news releases, Google, LinkedIn, all of those things. Um, Another point as well is a lot of the times prepare questions yourself about the company itself. Like maybe what's their company culture, like, what does a average work week look like for them, how many hours, that sort of thing. Really just to get to know what sort of job you're interviewing for. I always recommend candidates review the job description before the interview. That's really a key to help you prepare, because the clues on what question the employer will ask you are in the job description. So an employer isn't going to ask you if you have skills or what experience you have in a certain qualification. That's not on the job description. They don't care. What they want to know is, do you meet the requirements of the job? So go over and review the job description. And you know what you can do is you can actually prepare concrete examples of what you've done in the past during your previous jobs that can potentially prove to the employer that you know how to do that skill, or you know how to do how to respond to that requirement. So by preparing concrete examples of you having done those things in the past, the recruiter will know that you've been able to do it, and that you're prepared as well for the interview. It's very possible that you might have questions in another language, especially if the job requires that you speak French and English. So maybe, just if applicable, just make sure that you might be prepared for a question in another language. It doesn't always happen, but it might. And sometimes this might not be in the first interview, might be in the second or later on. Sometimes the company will ask you, or the employer will ask you, what do you intend to do on the first few months or weeks of the job? So, it could be a good preparation as well for you to think, okay, how would I start working for this company? What are the first few things I would do? All right. So now on the day of the interview, how do you make sure that you're ready and that your best self is presented? Firstly, punctuality. Punctuality. I know in many places, and Montreal is no exception, punctuality is key. Make sure you're on time for your interview, even if it's a virtual interview. So I always recommend log on to the call maybe 5 to 10 minutes before the interview, just to know that your internet connection's working, your video's working, your sound is working. It's always a safe bet to do that. Obviously, make sure that that you're in a nicely lit area that's pretty quiet. You don't want so many disruptions. Obviously, we all know that we're working from home. There's sometimes kids, cats, dogs running around. It's not always easy to do that, but as much as possible, if you can, I recommend it. Yeah, I mentioned internet connection. I'll say it again. You don't want your interview to cut halfway through. That just breaks the flow of it, and it can be very stressful. So make sure that you do that. Make sure you're presented well. I say dress for success, but honestly, that means a lot. And especially in these industries of video games and visual effects, it's very informal. People are in t-shirts and everything. So you don't necessarily have to wear a suit and tie, but just make sure that you're presented well, that you give a good impression. And that's also in your nonverbal actions as well. A smile can go a long way. So just make sure that you're yourself, but also that you're presented well. And again, I said this earlier and I'll say it again. Make sure that you give precise examples of what your previous work experience was. I was a recruiter for 5 years, and the question that comes back all the time is, can you give me a precise example of when you had to do such and such thing? So, like I said, refer to the job description, see what the requirements are, and then try to find precise examples that respond to those requirements. And yeah, so that's pretty much the points of during the interview, how to really make sure that you impress the recruiters. After the interview, I'm going to go very quickly through this. Always a great idea to send a thank you email, and I will tell you right away of you all that I'm speaking to. For those of you that are going to have an interview, maybe only about 10% of you are going to write a thank you email after the interview. I know this again because of personal experience, but it means so much to a recruiter. It means that you're serious about the job, that you really appreciate the time that they gave you. And honestly, it's free. It costs you nothing, but it gives a good impression. So make sure you send a thank you email after your interview. Get ready for a second interview. A lot of the times, it's not just one interview that the recruiter is going to decide on whether you get hired or not. They will tell you what the next steps are. So, and if they don't tell you, feel free to ask them. Tell them what's next. What can I expect? And you can also ask them, by what time will you make your decision? So you will know as well when you can expect to hear back from them, whether it's positive or negative. Um, Now, and also regarding that, if you don't hear back from them by the deadline that they gave you, you can feel free to ask them for an update, ask them if they need maybe more information from you. What I would say is, as much as possible, it's a fine line between putting too much pressure and asking for news and just asking for a follow-up. So definitely don't write to them asking for a follow-up before the deadline that they gave you. And even after that, know that recruiters work on many jobs. They work on a lot of different interviews. So sometimes they fall behind. They really shouldn't, and they should give you follow-up. So make sure you ask for it, but give them a bit of a breather time to do that. And yes, last point. This is a bit, maybe a bit obvious for many of you, but I do say it because, um, say you've got the job. So you did a great interview. Everybody loves you, and they're saying, okay, we want you to come work for us. The employer is then going to start the steps of actually applying for your work permit and getting you legal status to come work in Canada. That can be a long process. Just be very patient. It can take several months before you get any documentation for you to come relocate to Canada. So I always tell the candidates, don't take any serious action before you have legal status to come work in Quebec and Canada. So that's your legal authorization. You don't want to sell your house. You don't want to quit your job before doing that. Make sure that, you do that in the right order, because you can get a nasty surprise if anything falls through. So that covers kind of the interview section of, how to basically be prepared. So I'm just going to take a few final minutes here, really, just to discuss the recruitment event that I mentioned earlier, the Journée Québec Video Games and VFX event. Interviews are taking place from November 15th to 21st. So coming up in a bit less than a month. So here's the information about the companies that are participating in this event. We have 17 companies that are in video games and visual effects, and even a few other sectors that are, related, but are not necessarily in those sectors themselves. You've got anywhere from independent studios to AAA studios. So you can really find what you're looking for. This is a bit of a description of the types of jobs that are posted. So if any of these you have experience in them, then definitely make sure that you apply. Josh has just shared with you guys the link to the page. So definitely go take a look at those job descriptions and see if there's any positions that are interesting for you. Now, a few steps, important steps on how the event is going to work. So applications, we are accepting applications up until November 12th. So make sure that you apply to any of these jobs before November 12th. Very important. So you want to create your profile, like I said, add your skills, answer the questions, give your availabilities for an interview, and then apply to the jobs. It's really quite simple. The recruiters are going to start inviting candidates for an interview as of November 1st. So they have 2 weeks to send all of the invitations for interview. They're all going to be virtual interviews for obvious reasons, because of the pandemic and because, we're all working from home. But just know that the invitations to the candidates are only going to be sent to those candidates that are selected for an interview. So it is very possible that you apply to a job and that you don't hear back from a recruiter. Unfortunately, it will happen because they only will contact those candidates that are selected for the interview. So just keep that in mind. And then finally, virtual interviews taking place from November 15th to 21st. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Josh to share a quick video, very quick for you guys, on how to actually submit your application on the talentmontreal.com portal and how to apply for the job. So take it away. Thanks, Josh. So let me just go quickly back to the presentation here. Great. So just to finish the presentation, this is a reminder for those of you that have questions on immigration. We have our 4 presentations that are available. It's on the same talentmontreal.com events page as you found this invitation. So feel free to register for any of those immigration webinars, and we hope that'll answer your questions. So that finishes it for me. I'm going to ask all of the presenters and Josh as well to come back on the line, and we'll take the next 10 minutes or so to really answer. I know there was a number of questions that came through, so we love answering questions. So we'll definitely take it from there.
Yeah, thanks everybody for your presentations today. So a few interesting questions, so I'll go step by step. Hopefully we'll have enough time to answer all of them. Maybe for Cecilia, I mean, there was a few questions. One was, they have cash machines all along with Canada.
The ATM machines. Yes,
Yeah.
well, there are ATM machines everywhere that accessible to their Desjardins account. As for not being charged for the extra fees, the Desjardins is actually everywhere in Ontario and Quebec, and of course Montreal. Not in BC, and not the rest of the Canada.
Okay, thanks. But they can still use other cash machines to withdraw money, no problem, I believe.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Maybe another one for Natalia and Heidi. There was someone who was asking, Camilo actually is asking, is it recommended to rent with furniture already, or?
Really depends on what you would like. So for sure, there's a premium for renting with furniture. It'll usually amount to a couple of $100s a month, which if you're planning on staying, long term or at least more than a year, might be interested to find your own furniture. But definitely a good idea once you arrive for the first time. A lot of our expats will be renting an Airbnb for a couple of weeks until they're find their permanent rental.
Awesome, thanks. I have a couple of questions about credit scores, and they're two different questions, but I believe we can answer both in one take. It was asked, sorry, I just lost the question here. So how is the credit score calculated for new immigrants who arrive with a job? Along the same lines, is it possible to increase the credit score before arriving in Canada by making investments, shopping online, or making payments on time?
Excellent question. And I'm glad the question is asked. Credit score is very important. As a newcomer, they don't have a history of credit scores, so they don't need to worry about that. They only start building it the moment they start using their credit in Canada. So if they already have a job offer, they have a working contract, there's no problem. They arrive, they get their pay, it's deposited in their account, and they get their first credit card. And that's when they have to start being more responsible and disciplined in paying off their credit card on time. They don't need to start doing any investment or doing any shopping online to build their credit history, because the credit history is only for Canada. It's not linked to any other countries.
Okay, understood. Thanks. Another question for you, though. Do I need to have an exact date to arrive before opening an account with Desjardins?
No, they don't need to have an exact date. They put in an approximate date. We have pre-accounts opening up until 12 months. It's not even, say, 18 months, because sometimes things can be delayed. So they don't need to have an exact date.
Okay, thank you. Now, I do have another question. It's a bit touchy, but I think it's important to answer it regardless. From Michael Etez. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing it right, but can a homeowner refuse to rent an apartment to homosexuals?
That's actually a great question. So no, they absolutely cannot. You cannot refuse to rent an apartment based on gender, on race, on family
Religion.
members. So you could not refuse a family of 4 or 5 kids. There are very specific criterias. You can only refuse a tenant if you find that they're not financially solvable, which means that you don't think that they're going to have the means to honor the rent, or because they have pets. That is something that you can refuse a tenant for that. But other than that, no. And I have to say, in my personal experience, I've never come across a situation like that. And thankfully, we've been helping expats for the last 15 years, and we've never had a situation like that.
Awesome. I think that's going to help out a lot of people out there for sure. There was an interesting question and a funny one personally, but it was Camilo asking as well. I'm curious why most of the properties have just one bathroom.
That's a good question, actually. So properties that have up to 3 bedrooms usually will only have 1 bathroom. They might have a water room, which we call the powder room, which is just a toilet and a sink. But that multiple bathrooms, you will get that more into homes. And I know it's very different, because sometimes when we travel, we see that 1 bedroom equates to 1 bathroom, but that's not the standard here. So up till about 3 bedrooms, you'll have only 1 full bathroom.
Okay. For Stella, I'm going to generalize the question more than the specificity, but there was someone asking about if I have an offer, how can I negotiate my salary if I don't know what to answer, because in my country it's a bit different. So what would you suggest?
Yeah, and salaries are really going to vary depending on where you're from, and also, what the standard is here. Know that when a Quebec recruiter, or if any company is going to apply for a working visa for you a work permit for you to come legally work in the country, they actually have a certain window of salary that they can give you. It's basically what's equivalent to the industry standard. The idea behind that is that the government doesn't want an employer to go abroad and bring someone on a very low salary. So they have to respect certain criteria with regards to salary on when they give you the offer and when they apply for your immigration papers. That being said, I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, what's the minimum and maximum, but what can you as a potential employee negotiate for? So I think your best friend is really Google. Google, LinkedIn, Glassdoor. There's a lot of tools online that will give you a good idea of what the industry standards are for your profession, whether you're a developer, whether you're an artist, whether you have 10 years experience or 5 years or 3 years experience, that can really, give you a good idea of what sort of salary you would like to ask for.
All right, thank you very much, Stella. I know it's a question that comes back often, but I think it's always good to answer it. But is home insurance needed when we're renting, Heidi or Natalia?
Sure, definitely. I mean, it's not mandatory, although you will see some landlords that are going to ask you to have it, in which case it does become mandatory, but it's not a regulation throughout the province. But definitely, we're not doing you any favor by saying that you shouldn't get one. You really should, because you need that civil insurance liability in there.
Thanks, Heidi. So I'm looking through the questions. I think it's pretty much answering it for now. I think I'll just wait a few more seconds for more questions to come in. But in any case, I'd like to thank everybody for presenting today. It was really great. I think we've answered a lot of questions, and I've had a lot of comments as well in the question sections about very enlightening, especially on both fronts. So thanks again for everything. And I think that's going to be pretty much signing them up. So as we said, this entire presentation is recorded, and we will be reaching out to everybody who registered for the event to send out the recording as well as some hot links with all some good stuff, information about what we presented today.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, too.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys. Have a good one.
Bye.